Most people think productivity starts with motivation. That belief is exactly why they never experience real productivity. The most productive people don't feel motivated. They don't feel inspired. They don't wake up ready to conquer anything. And that's why their output looks unfair. Here's the part no one tells you. Motivation is not a control system. It's a reward signal. Neurologically, it appears after progress, not before it. So when you wait to feel motivated, you're waiting for an effect to create its own cause. That's why discipline feels exhausting. You're forcing the brain to fight itself. High performers don't do that. They don't push harder. They don't rely on willpower. They remove emotion from the equation entirely. They design their environment, their constraints, and their defaults so action happens automatically, before resistance has time to form. This is the shift most people never make. Productivity isn't about forcing yourself to work. It's about making inaction more uncomfortable than action. Once that system is in place, motivation becomes irrelevant. Not because you became stronger, but because the system did.
You know you are in the right zone when the work gets done. And nothing inside you resists it. No tension. No internal debate. No need to get in the mood. Just output. Think of it like this. Most people work like they are driving a car uphill, foot shaking on the gas, engine screaming. High performers are on a flat road, on cruise control, barely touching the wheel. Same destination, completely different nervous system cost. Here is a practical example. Two people sit down to work. One waits to feel ready, checks messages, adjusts music, negotiates with themselves. The other opens the laptop and starts. Not because they feel good, but because starting feels neutral. No drama, no emotional charge. That neutrality is the advantage. From a neurological perspective, emotional resistance activates the limbic system, the brain's threat and avoidance circuitry. Every time you push yourself, you burn glucose in the prefrontal cortex just to override that signal. That is expensive. Studies on cognitive load show that emotional friction increases perceived effort without increasing output. In simple terms, you feel more tired without doing more work. Elite performers remove that friction entirely. They do not ask, "Do I feel like this?" They have designed their workflow so the first action is so small, so default, that the brain does not trigger resistance at all. The result is deceptive. From the outside, it looks like discipline. From the inside, it feels like nothing. And here is the part most people miss. When work no longer costs emotional energy, consistency stops being a challenge. It becomes automatic. That is when productivity starts to compound quietly. And in the next part, we will expose why relying on motivation actually trains your brain to resist work, and how high performers reverse that loop entirely. At the highest level, motivation is not a boost. It is a delay. The people who rely on it do not fail loudly. They stall quietly. Picture motivation like caffeine in the middle of a marathon. It feels powerful at first. Then your hands shake, your pace breaks, and suddenly the crash decides when you stop. That is exactly how most people work. A real example. You wake up motivated. You plan too much. You overcommit. You feel productive before producing anything. 3 hours later, the energy drops. The task has not moved, and how the work feels heavier than it actually is. Here is the neurological problem. Motivation is tied to dopamine spikes. Dopamine is not about effort. It is about anticipation. When anticipation disappears, so does drive. This is why research in behavioral psychology shows that high dopamine states increase initiation, but reduce persistence. You start more, you finish less. High performers learn this early. They treat motivation like a volatile asset, useful only in short bursts. Dangerous if you build a system around it. So instead of asking, "Am I motivated?" they ask a quieter question. What happens if I do not act? That shift rewires behavior. Now action is not pulled by excitement. It is pushed by inevitability. The reward is subtle, but powerful. You stop riding emotional waves. You stop negotiating with yourself. Work becomes something you step into, not something you psych yourself up for. And in the next block, you will see why constraint, not freedom, is what actually creates speed. The fastest work you have ever done happened when you had no choice, no options, no flexibility, no escape. And suddenly, you moved. Constraint works like narrowing a river. Wide water drifts. Narrow water cuts through rock. Most people confuse freedom with effectiveness. They give themselves endless time, endless tools, endless options. They're really giving themselves its friction. Here is a simple, familiar scene. A task with no deadline sits untouched for weeks. The same task, due in 2 hours, gets done in 20 minutes. Not better motivation, different constraints. Your brain hates open loops. When time is unlimited, the mind keeps renegotiating. When time collapses, hesitation disappears. This is not personality. It is architecture. Psychology calls it choice overload. The more options you have, the slower you decide, and the more mental energy you burn deciding. High performers weaponize the opposite. They shrink time windows. They reduce options to one. They make certain decisions irreversible. The result feels aggressive from the outside. From the inside, it feels clean. No debating. No second guessing. Just movement. And here is the quiet reward. Constraint removes self-blame. When the rules are tight, you do not argue with yourself. You execute. In the next part, we will go deeper into how identity takes over once constraints are in place, and why discipline quietly disappears when identity starts deciding for you. At a certain level, there is no decision left to make. The work happens because this is who you are. Identity works like gravity. You do not negotiate with it. You fall in its direction. Watch two people with the same task. One asks, "Should I work on this now?" The other does not ask anything at all. They open the file. They begin. Not because they are disciplined. Because hesitation is not part of their self-image. Here's the psychology behind it. The brain protects identity before comfort. When an action is tied to who you believe you are, resisting it feels wrong, almost like lying. That is why habits linked to identity are radically more stable than habits linked to goals. Goals expire. Identity persists. There is a quiet example of this everywhere. A professional athlete does not decide to train. A surgeon does not negotiate whether to prepare. An elite operator does not wait for the right mood. They execute because not executing would violate who they are. Neuroscience calls this self-consistency bias. We unconsciously act to remain aligned with our internal identity narrative. Once identity takes over, discipline becomes unnecessary. Motivation becomes irrelevant. Action becomes automatic. And the emotional reward is subtle but profound. You stop feeling fragmented. No inner arguments. No self-betrayal. In the next block, you will see how elite performers lock this identity into place using silent systems that decide before you even notice a choice exists. At the highest level, nothing is decided in the moment. The decision was made yesterday, or last week, or by a system you do not consciously notice. Willpower is loud. It argues. It demands attention. Systems are silent. They just work. Think of willpower like holding a door shut in a storm. Muscles shaking, focus burning. Eventually, the door opens. A system is a lock. No effort, no noise. The wind does not even try. Here is what this looks like in real life. An elite performer does not decide when to work. The calendar already decided. The environment already decided. The defaults already decided. There is no moment of choice, and that is the point. Cognitive science shows that every decision taxes the prefrontal cortex. Even small ones, What to start, when to stop. What comes next? This is called decision fatigue. High performers design their days to avoid it entirely. Same start time, same first task, same sequence. From the outside, it looks rigid. From the inside, it feels liberating. Here is the micro-curiosity most people miss. The brain experiences relief when choice disappears. Less thinking, less resistance, more flow. The emotional reward is immediate. You feel calm while being effective, focused without force, consistent without stress. And in the final block, we will reveal the last lever, emotional neutrality, the state where productivity no longer feels like effort at all, but a quiet, unfair advantage. The work gets done, and you feel nothing about it. No excitement, no resistance, no emotional spike to manage, just execution. Emotional neutrality is like noise-canceling headphones for the mind. The chaos does not disappear, it just cannot reach you. Here is a familiar contrast. One person works only when they feel confident, inspired, emotionally aligned. Their output rises and falls like weather. Another works on good days and bad ones and produces almost the same result. Not because they are tougher, because emotion is no longer part of the equation. There is a reason elite surgeons, pilots, and operators are trained toward emotional flatness under pressure. High emotional variance degrades precision. Neutrality preserves it. Neuroscience backs this up. Emotional arousal increases limbic activity, which competes with the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for focus, sequencing, and judgment. In simple terms, the more you feel, the less precisely you think. High performers do not suppress emotion. They decouple it from action. They show up whether the day feels heavy or light, whether confidence is high or absent, whether motivation is there or not. That is the leverage. The result is subtle but powerful. Your nervous system stays calm. Your output stays consistent. Your identity stays intact. And the emotional reward arrives quietly at the end of the day. No guilt, no mental residue, no sense of internal conflict. Just the calm certainty that progress happened, without drama. And when productivity reaches this state, it stops feeling impressive and starts feeling inevitable. Let us zoom out for a second. What we actually dismantled here was not productivity. It was the struggle around it. You saw it clearly. You do not need motivation. You do not need more discipline. You do not need to fight yourself harder, because that fight, that daily negotiation, that emotional drag, that sense of always being behind, that was the real cost. That is the pain most people normalize. Feeling busy but not dangerous. Working hard but not compounding. Ending the day tired, with the quiet suspicion that nothing truly moved. What creates the illegal feeling is not effort. It is alignment. Output without emotional cost. Motivation treated as a liability. Constraints that create speed. Identity that executes automatically. Systems that decide in silence. And emotional neutrality that keeps everything stable. When those layers stack, action stops being heroic. It becomes inevitable. But here is the uncomfortable next problem, and this is where most people get stuck. Even with all of this, your environment may still be working against you. Your phone, your calendar, your inputs, your attention economy. So the next question is not how to work. It is how to protect focus in a world engineered to fracture it. That is where the real separation happens. And if you are listening to this and thinking, this feels like it was made for people like me, that is not an accident. This is not mass motivation. It is quiet leverage shared among people who value precision over noise. We will continue there. Let us bring it back to what actually changed. You did not learn how to push harder. You learned how to stop fighting yourself. The real pain was never laziness. It was friction. emotion in the wrong place, decisions that should not exist, systems that forced you to negotiate with your own mind. That is what kept productivity loud, heavy, and inconsistent. The quiet shift is this. When emotion is removed, when identity decides, when systems carry the weight, work stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like alignment. This is what most people never see. They chase intensity. You build inevitability, but there is a deeper layer ahead. Even with the right systems, even with emotional neutrality, there is one thing that can still destroy everything. Where your energy leaks, attention, stimulation, unnecessary input. Highly effective people do not just manage time. They defend energy, aggressively, intentionally, without apology. That is what we will break down next, Inc. Why highly effective people protect their energy at all costs. And if this way of thinking feels familiar, precise, calm, almost private, then you already know this channel exists. This is not about doing more. It is about moving through the world with less noise and more control. We continue there.